Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you that are calling in for the first time and will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We like to move quickly through our calls. Bottom line, the information for you. We know you're busy people. We have a standard format. We spend a few minutes talking about the reinstitution of the Iraqi dinar, which we continue to believe is the base currency for the potential reset of those other currencies. A few minutes talking about the program we've put in place to assist you, and then we go to a brief Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq. First, by way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the purchase or sale of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves, we're sharing with you the information that we think is relevant. Of course, the most relevant piece of information would be the window for the reinstitution of the Iraqi dinar. We were hopeful that January this would occur for a number of reasons. However, for reasons that I'll explain in a little bit more detail, the fact that it did not happen in January does not mean that the reinstatement will not happen very shortly, certainly in the first quarter. And again, I'll explain that in a little bit more detail as we proceed. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on right now in Iraq, because there is a lot happening. The President of the Republic, Salih, has chosen a gentleman by the name of Mohammed Alawi to head the transitional or interim government. Now, Alawi is not the preferred choice of the protesters, and the Iranians are already claiming that Alawi is one of their own, i.e., he is corruptible. But in fact, he is a Shia, but he is not a radical Shia, and he is not pro-Iranian. Let me give you a little background on Mr. Alawi. He's a very well-educated man. He was the current Minister of Communications, now designated as the interim Prime Minister. But he was also the Minister of Communication under the Maliki government. And he resigned for that government specifically as a protest against Maliki's sectarian agenda, i.e., elbowing out all Sunni and Kurds, and targeting certain high-level officials that were not, in fact, Shia. So the guy does have a track record that we can feel comfortable is going to move the agenda forward. He is also supported by the two largest parliamentary coalitions, the Ameri Coalition and the Sadrist Coalition. So while he may not be anyone's first choice, all things considered, from all sides, he's probably the best choice. At worst, he is a default choice. At best, he was the only choice. Now, what's important about this, and this is going to be a short discussion here, what's important about this is the fact that, and I've discussed this before, the UN, the IMF, and the U.S. Treasury have put a lot of pressure on Iraq to get things done, to get the government in place, and ultimately to get their currency reforms done so that their currency can reinstitute and revalue globally. So there are a couple of issues. One is the budget, and the other is the CBI operations. With regard to the budget, I've been on the phone a long time this morning trying to find out exactly where we are on the budget. I'm getting some conflicting stories, but the bottom line, as I understand it, is this. The last important link in the passage of the budget had to do with the Kurds in the region of Kurdistan to agree with the revenue sharing that's part of the 2020 budget. It's my understanding that that has been agreed upon and that the budget is ready for final passage. With regard to CBI operations, they have announced that they're going to continue with the project to delete the zeros. They expect the imminent release of the lower dinars, which makes no sense without the new budget and a reinstitution. So with regard to the reinstitution, there are a couple of possibilities. Either the reinstitution will occur just before or simultaneous with the passage of the budget, or should the budget pass at the 1180 rate, the government will simply have to defer making expenditures until that reinstitution occurs, which would have to occur shortly after the passage of the budget. Now, the worst case scenario, which is the one we all hope to avoid and the one that I think we will avoid, is that for some unknown reason, they just can't get their act together and they do not get the currency reinstituted. And the government ends up having to make major expenditures at the 1180 rate. If that happens, it would be a lot more complicated to get the budget redone at the reinstituted rate, meaning the worst case scenario would be this could theoretically get pushed till next January. So I have to be straightforward about that. That is a possibility. But I really believe under the current circumstances, the greater likelihood, the probability is we will see the reinstitution in the not-too-distant future, certainly in this quarter. Now, that being the case, once again, we have to address what needs to be done in order to get your affairs in order prior to this revaluation. Most dinarians are, frankly, and I will classify myself in this group, Joe Lunchbucket folks, that maybe for the first time in their life will have to manage a very large sum of money, a sum of money which came along literally overnight. To that end, Trusts Unlimited has put a turnkey program in place to assist you. It involves a lot of different professionals with a lot of different specific expertise. It's a two-phased program. Phase 1 is pre-RV. Phase 2 is post-RV. Pre-RV involves the establishment of a package of pre-RV asset protection trusts with the assignment of your pre-valued currencies on paper to that trust package. Post-RV involves all of the products, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you after the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. So let's start with Phase 1, which is, again, the establishment of a package of pre-RV asset protection trusts with the assignment of your currencies on paper to that trust package. There are a number of different entities one can establish to provide some level of asset protection. For example, individuals can establish LLCs and sub-S corporations. Now, they are business entities, and they do provide some asset protection, primarily by separating business assets from personal assets. The rub here is that these currencies are a personal asset. In addition, courts have ruled that LLCs and sub-S corporations owned in the majority by one person or a group of individuals can be pierced for civil litigation. So that makes these entities inappropriate for the asset protection needs. Some individuals have established an asset referred to as a revocable living trust. Now, a revocable living trust will exempt your estate from the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax, but revocable trusts provide no privacy or asset protection. So again, they're going to be inappropriate for your needs. Lastly, some individuals have established single irrevocable trusts, and they do provide substantially more privacy and asset protection than the LLC, sub-S corporation, and revocable trust. However, there is an inherent flaw with a single trust. Since all of your assets are housed in one trust or one legal entity, if one of those assets gets involved in civil litigation, that would necessarily drag all of the other assets into that litigation, again, because they're all owned by the same entity. The way to circumvent all of those issues is through the establishment of a package of irrevocable trusts, which in our view is the best asset protection available domestically. And in addition to the protection it will provide both pre- and post-RV, there are very important reasons why such a package needs to be established prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. And I'll review those reasons with you here. First, by establishing this trust package, pre-RV, you will preserve your privacy and your anonymity. That's because assets within our trust package are sealed, meaning that the general public will have no knowledge of your net worth or your actual holdings. Second, by establishing this trust package, you will successfully avoid personal IRS scrutiny. If you are holding these currencies in direct title when they revalue, the IRS computers will probably spit out an audit. And with the potential magnitude of this revaluation relative to your prior year's earnings, you're probably looking at a full-blown 6-year audit. Such an audit would be time-consuming. It would certainly be frustrating because it would come along at the precise time of the revaluation, and you have much more important things to deal with. But most importantly, the cost of a 6-year IRS audit would actually be more than the cost of our trust. On the other hand, if your trust is in place and your currencies have been assigned to that trust, you will have successfully transferred the taxable event of this revaluation from yourself personally to the trust. Now, this is important for two reasons. First, there's less than a 10% chance of an IRS audit if this revaluation and the taxable event that it would trigger were to occur within our trust package. But second, and most importantly, even if the IRS determines to audit your trust, they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself. The third reason you'd want to establish this trust package, because included in this package is a specially designed gift subtrust. Now, philanthropic gifting can always be done on a tax-preferred basis, either pre- or post-RV. But in order to avoid a substantial 40% gift tax, you're going to need to give currencies to family and friends before they revalue. Now, if you're gifting to individuals that you have no problem giving them the currency to exchange for themselves, or giving them the lump sum after you have negotiated the exchange, that can be accomplished outside of a trust with a standard gift letter. But if you are hesitant for any reason to give these individuals the post-RV lump sum, you can gift to them through this special gift subtrust. Because this subtrust is part of our package, their U.S. dollars will be protected along with yours. In addition, you will have complete control of the money within that subtrust, meaning you can manage that money, invest that money, and distribute that money to those individuals as you deem appropriate. And third, the specific language of this subtrust allows you to gift up to a certain amount of a currency or currencies, meaning at the end of the day, you can gift to these individuals the exact U.S. dollar amount that you had in mind, irrespective of the exchange rate. The fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is because it's been structured in such a way as to allow your estate to bypass the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. I'll give you two quick scenarios. Scenario number one, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs an estate of $25 million. Now that estate must go through probate, a process that ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. But probate is a public disclosure process, meaning that the general public will be aware of the size of your estate, who your heirs are, and how much they each stand to inherit. So if anyone feels they have a legitimate claim against you, your estate, or your heirs, they can simply file that claim with a probate court. And that could tie your estate up for years, and in some cases even decades. And your heirs will have either limited access or no access at all to their respective inheritance until the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax. This is the tax that the federal government would assess in order for that estate to be transferred to your heirs. Under current law, approximately $10 million of that $25 million estate would bypass any federal estate tax. But the balance could be taxed as much as 55%. Now, this scenario is not only unacceptable, it's completely and totally avoidable. Scenario number 2, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, you assign those currencies on paper to our asset protection trust package. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs that very same estate of $25 million, but this time protected in our asset protection trust package. As a result, there will be no probate. There will be no public disclosure of your estate. Your heirs will have immediate access to their respective inheritance, and the federal estate tax will be zero, saving your heirs as much as 55% of their inheritance. The fifth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is for some very specific asset protection benefits. One pre-RV, one post-RV. Pre-RV, this trust package will allow you to circumvent something called the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. What does that mean? Under our system of civil procedure, you can only be sued for what you actually own in direct title or the value of property at the time you transfer it out of title to an entity like our trust package. So let's take the previous example from before. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000, assign those currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. You begin to live a lifestyle more reflective of your newfound wealth, and a couple of years down the road, someone sees that you're living rather comfortably and decides for whatever reason that they're going to sue you. Well, this prospective plaintiff has a couple of problems. First, he or she better have a very strong case and very deep pockets, because this trust is structured in such a way as to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to pursue civil litigation. But second, and most importantly, once any prospective plaintiff learns that pursuant to the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, the only thing they could ever win by way of a civil award would be $5,000, the value of the currency at the time you transferred it out of title and into the trust, and none of the post-RV value of $25 million, there will be no lawsuit. Post-RV, there's an asset protection benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop-loss. This protects you from future bad acts after you have acquired this wealth. This protection is accomplished through a legal strategy called segregation of assets, and this is how it would work. Once again, we'll use the same example. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000, transfer the currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. Now you decide to make some purchases. So you purchase a larger primary residence, a vacation home, perhaps a half a dozen rental properties for tax write-off and additional cash flow, a couple of cars, a boat, and let's say an RV. But as you purchase each of these items, you place each of them in their own separate subtrust to be managed by your master trust. This is the package approach. Now, why is this important from an asset protection standpoint? Well, let's say one day you're driving one of your new cars. You have an accident. The accident is clearly your fault, and tragically someone is seriously injured or even killed. Well, the family of the victim is going to want to sue you. But remember, civil suits are about monetary awards, and you don't legally own anything. So the plaintiffs would be left to sue the owner of the car that you were driving. Well, who owns that car? One of your subtrusts, of which you are merely the beneficiary. And what's in that sub-trust? Merely that one car and the car insurance policy. In that scenario, the car insurance carrier will negotiate an out-of-court settlement with the victim's family. You will not be involved in those rather unpleasant negotiations. The car insurance carrier will repair or replace your car, making you whole. And this is the most important component of the asset protection. All of your other assets and net worth are safely protected in the other sub-trusts. Why? Because under the law, those separate sub-trusts are separate legal entities or persons, and the plaintiffs would have no standing to pursue a separate legal entity. So your trust package works very much the way a barge would work, where all of the valuable cargo is stored in a series of small compartments. Why? In the event that any compartment is ever breached, the only potential loss would be the cargo in that one compartment. The cargo in the other compartments is safe and secure due to the firewalls, and the barge will never sink. Now, these benefits are lost to you if you do not establish your package of trusts prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. Now, there is one other benefit, and it's this. If you are, in fact, a holder of one of our pre-RV asset protection trust packages, then you will be eligible to participate in Phase 2. All of the product services and professional referrals that will be made available to you after this revaluation. I'll just make mention of one here today. Trusts Unlimited will be sponsoring a post-RV seminar to be held in Disney World, Florida, approximately 30 days after the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. Present at that seminar will, of course, be the staff of Trusts Unlimited to assist you with the management and funding of your trust packages post-RV. Many of our clients have already expressed desires to establish scholarship funds, foundational trusts, special needs trusts, charitable remainder trusts, and even the more complicated 501c3 nonprofit and offshore trusts. And the proper way to fund those entities is through the direct transfer of funds from your asset protection trust to those newly formed entities. Now that you've acquired this wealth, you're going to need the advice of our tax specialists that will be teaching you a lot of the sophisticated tax strategies that many of you for the first time are going to need to employ to legally reduce your tax liabilities. We'll also have our independent fee-based wealth managers there as well. You're going to want to reposition assets after the revaluation for a number of reasons. First, we know statistically that 95% of all windfalls, however large and from whatever source, are lost within 3 to 5 years due to inexperience, mismanagement, and fraud. We also know that under the new G20 bank bail-in provisions, the failure of banks in the future will no longer be made whole through the general taxing authorities of the various countries, but first and foremost by the confiscation of funds at the accounts at those banks. So you're going to get a substantial amount of that money out of the bank and in work in other markets. Lastly, we know the general global shift from fiat-based to Basel III compliant commodity-backed currencies in and of itself is going to create extremely volatile financial markets, and you're going to want a substantial amount of your net worth in tangible assets in order to avoid that volatility. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts consisting of one master trust that will hold your assigned currencies pre-RV, your financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV, and manage the other sub-trusts. One optional gift sub-trust if you wish to gift currencies to family and friends and maintain control of the post-RV proceeds, which sub-trust can be converted anytime to a standard sub-trust, and then 8 additional standard sub-trusts to hold physical assets like homes, cars, boats, etc. Now, this was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we've utilized in the past for our more affluent clients, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But when we decided to work with Dinarians some years ago, we knew that price tag was going to be simply unaffordable for too many. So we basically simplified and back-end loaded this product, and by so doing, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. There are several ways you can pay for that. If you pay us up front, We'll discount the price to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If that's not possible, we do have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our out-of-pocket costs just to produce and deliver your trust. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is once the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar occurs, any unpaid balance would need to be paid within 30 days. So with this approach, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for getting their affairs in order and trust in place pre-RV should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be substantially less than the $100 a month you'd be paying us under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you in whatever method works best for you. Our objective is to help you get your affairs in order and your trust in place prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies for the reasons I've stated here. Now, one other point I'd like to make about this trust. That $3,000 fee is the one-time only fee for this trust. The only other cost, lifetime, for this trust will be the rather nominal paralegal fees for making changes and funding the subtrust. For an example, let's say after the revaluation, you purchase a $500,000 beach house. You call us and say, I'd like to create the Folly Field Beach Real Estate Trust to protect my $500,000 beach house. We will create that trust to protect that $500,000 asset for approximately $150 paralegal fee. So again, the subsequent paralegal fees are very nominal. We principals receive nothing. This is merely the pass-through fee to have the paralegal do the work. Now, we will be going to a Q&A in just a moment. But again, for our newer callers, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Trusts Unlimited, why you may want to seriously consider allowing us to assist you. And again, thank you for taking the time to listen to this call. Our trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas for over 38 years, and I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstatement of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have over 78 years' experience working precisely in these areas, and I frankly know of no firm that can make that claim. Now, Bob and I have been working together for about a decade in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning, and it has been disheartening from time to time to see people walk away from sound estate planning and trust creation because of the mistaken belief that by doing so they have somehow lost control of their assets and their affairs. In point of fact, it's just the reverse. Under our system of civil procedure, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can lose control of them or lose them outright. And it's invariably those times in life that you need and want control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've either experienced in your own life or through friends and family things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death and prolonged and complicated probate processes, large investment losses, business losses, and even bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth today in the aggregate, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. So in point of fact, the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything at all times and in all circumstances is through the establishment of a package of irrevocable trusts, and particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trusts Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives, both pre- and post-RV, as we understand them. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this call. I'm going to go to the Q&A in just a moment. When I do, I strongly suggest our newer callers have a pen and paper ready. If the things we're discussing here are of interest, I suggest you contact us and get our initial trust package. You're under absolutely no obligation by doing so, even though the package includes everything you need should you decide to proceed with the establishment of your pre-RV package of asset protection trusts. It has a lot of information about us, about the revaluation, about trusts in general. You can review the package, contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you, and there will be no consultation fee. But again, should you decide to proceed, everything you need is included in the package. I'm going to go ahead and open the Q&A now. Two quick rules on the Q&A. We do not take service calls here. This is for individuals that are interested in our program. Our clients can contact us by phone or email if they have any service issues or questions. And second, for obvious reasons, your name and number must be on the screen in order to participate in the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and open up now. And while I'm waiting for any potential questions, I'd like to give you our contact information. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimited, LLC.com. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimited, LLC at gmail.com. Our phone service is 307-274-4122. If you would like to listen to a recent conference call playback, or if you'd be kind enough to refer us to someone that might be interested in our services, you can either go to YouTube and then go to Trusts Unlimited, or you can go to IQD calls and go to Trusts Unlimited, or you can simply dial the same number that you dialed for our live call with the exception of the last digit. Rather than dialing 4, you'll dial a 3 and then use the same access code, which is 739-394-pound. If you'd like to be included on our email list, you can go to our website, go to the bottom, enter your name and email address where indicated. You should be in our email list within 24 hours. Bear in mind that we only send emails out periodically pre-RV, but once the reinstitution of the Dinar occurs, emails will probably be going out on a weekly basis. So let's go to the Q&A here. Our first caller is area code 405. That's 405. Go ahead.
Good day, Jim. This is Doug Reeves in
yes, sir.
Oklahoma City. Hey, you mentioned that there are 3 entities putting pressure on Iraq, the UN, the IMF, and the U.S. Treasury. I'm familiar with what the UN is doing. Could you give us a little more detail on what pressure the IMF and our U.S. Treasury is exerting on Iraq? I said Iran. I meant Iraq.
Sure. Now, there are a number of articles that participating members in the IRF nations can participate in. Article 8 is the article which means that the country is in good order and that if their currency is in a program rate, it will be reinstituted and find its equilibrium rate vis-a-vis other currencies. What the IMF has said is you will remain in Article 14, which is sort of limbo and will not go into Article 8. In other words, your currency will not revalue, and we will not recognize your reinstitution, even if you attempt it, if you haven't accomplished certain things. So the threat is they'd remain in Article 14 with the IMF. Actually, it's not really the Treasury Department per se, but it's the Trump administration which has said that the exemption for sanctions for violating, the exemption that Iraq enjoys for circumventing the sanctions against Iran are to be lifted by mid-February. So if they don't get it together by mid-February, then they too will be sanctioned along with the other countries that have done any business with Iran. And of course, that'll be hitting diminishing returns for them quickly, so they don't want that to occur. So again, it's the UN threatening Chapter 7. It's the IMF threatening to leave them in Article 14, and it's the United States threatening to lift the exemption from sanctions.
The IMF in Article 14 there are certain requirements. Do we know if they have met these or if they are getting close?
They are close, but they just got to push through. They have to have, of course, the prime minister that's been put in there as a transitional or interim prime minister is sufficient for them to proceed. But they still have to have the election for the new prime minister. They still have to complete the deletion of the zeros. They still have to have consequences for the corrupt politicians and get all the Iranian influence out of the country. And they don't necessarily have to have all of these things completed, but they have to move strongly in that direction. And thus far, the IMF is not impressed with what they've done. I do think the next 2 weeks are going to be critical for a lot of reasons. And I really do think Iraq does not want the Trump administration to pull the trigger on sanctions, because Trump's made it clear he's not fooling around. When he took out Soleimani, when he refused to remove the American troops pursuant to the Liberation Agreement of 2003, Trump's just made it clear. You've agreed to certain things, we're going to hold you to it, or you're going to have a real bad day.
Okay, you talked about the budget. One of the things was the Kurds agreed to revenue sharing. Do we know if they have or have not agreed to those?
Yeah, I said that on the call. My understanding is that they have come to an agreement on the revenue sharing, which was the last really major obstacle. So things should be, moving along very quickly now.
Two more things. The distribution of the lower denoms. I understand that the money is actually out in the regions, but just hasn't been made available, and it really wouldn't make any sense to them to be distributed yet, because they would have so little value at the current rate.
The coinage in the lower denoms are in the possession of the 8 regional banks, but you're exactly right. They're utterly worthless until they reinstitute, because they're going to go minimum on the reinstitution from the 1180 rate to roughly 85 cents. Each dinar will be worth 85 U.S. cents, or 85 cents. So that's huge. So there's no reason to release them until that happens.
Right. Last point. There's always been a concern about the corruption with the currency auctions. Do we know if they've decided to stop those?
That's one of the prerequisites for to come out of Article 14. And there also the disparity, the difference between the auction rate and the actual rate, that spread, that little arbitrage rate is what the corrupt officials are making a skim off of. So the auctions are going to have to stop.
Okay. So mid-February, if Trump doesn't give them a slide on the sanctions exemptions, should bring some pressure. But theoretically, whether they get it done by the 15th or not, it doesn't mean that they're not going to proceed. It just means that they've run out the clock and they haven't done the things that they had agreed to do. And the only way I see Trump extending beyond the 15th is if he has a hard agreement, a hard date with them. Okay, on the 17th, on the 21st, it's going to all be done. Then obviously it's not worth the trouble. But if they do come to another hard date and they go beyond that date, he'll pull the trigger. That's just who the guy is. Well, I think the hardest thing for Iraq to accomplish really is to diminish the influence of the Iranians in a very short period of time. I could see it happening because ultimately they're never really going to be a nation unless they get the Iranians out from controlling their politicians, which they were doing.
What's happening is the corrupt officials, the pro-Iranian officials, are using the auction, the U.S. dollars they get from selling their currency, and the Iranians are getting a skim from that. Once the currency is reinstituted, there's no need to have currency auctions to buy dollars. So the Iranians will just be, they'll be drained of that circumvention of the sanction.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you very much. We look
Sure.
forward to hearing from you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, Doug. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Our next caller is, oh, my goodness, it's area code 312. I wonder who could that be.
Hey, well, it ain't Doug. Doug was on a good roll there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I just got one question.
All right.
Good morning, first of all, and
Thanks
for taking my call. Great. So, you mentioned about next year. It could possibly. You didn't say it would be. You said it could possibly be dragged. The RV could be dragged out until January of next year. Now, I'm going back to last year when we were thinking and hoping it could be those other months that wasn't January. Why and how do you go all the way to January of next year if we were...
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because if they do not complete the elections, get a new prime minister, stop the auctions, deal with the corrupt officials, and complete their currency reforms, the deletion of the zeros, if they don't do all of that, they will fall back into Chapter 7 with the UN. They will remain in Article 14 with the IMF. The U.S. will institute the sanctions. They will not be able to recalibrate the budget once they start making payments at the 1180 rate. And this whole thing could get, I'm not saying it will, I'm just saying it could,
right.
Worst case scenario, get dragged out to January of 2021.
Okay. All right.
Here's the way I look at it. That means I got to make 52 more of these calls. So believe me, I don't want it to happen. It just could.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Where's our buddy at? I haven't heard from him. Pennsylvania.
He's in his RV having a good trip. He's running around. He's having a good time.
Ain't that nothing?
Yeah. That's what I'm going to do after the RV.
You and me both. I'm gonna pick up where everyone else has left off, or you too, for that matter, because I plan on buying one of those things, a big one.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks.
You have a good one, my friend.
All right, you too. Say hi to the professor. All right.
Will do. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we have a caller here, area code 347. That's 347. Go ahead.
Yes, Praveen from New York. I have a question about the IMF now. So will the IMF be satisfied within the time frame you suggested when Iraq deletes when the CBI deletes the 3 zeros and
if they reinstitute their currency, the United States signs off, says, yeah, I think they've either dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's, or they're close. I think the IMF will relent. Now, of the 3 threats, Chapter 7 of the UN, the IMF, Article 14, and the sanctions, the one that does the least damage is remaining in Article 14, because it's merely a formality to move them to Article 8. It's the other 2 that are really problematic for Iraq. They really the sanctions scares the hell out of them, and Chapter 7 scares the hell out of them. That'll really screw up their budget as well. So I don't think the IMF is going to be the linchpin to this. I think the other 2 are much more problematic. And again, they seem to be moving along fairly quickly now. Alawi was actually, as the interim, Alawi could end up, being the prime minister permanently, not just the transitional or interim prime minister. Again, if you know his history, he's kind of non-sectarian. He actually fled Iraq during Saddam's reign, because Saddam had a hit on him, and he was in Lebanon and then the United Kingdom for over 30 years before he came back in 2006, and then Maliki brought him in on the theory that since he was an enemy of Saddam, he must be very pro-Iranian, and then he resigned from the Maliki government because he opposed the Shia the sectarian agenda. So he seems like, even though he's a Shia, he's sort of in a body's range, kind of a moderate Shia, and he's figured out that he's got to set the tribal and sectarian stuff aside if we're going to create a modern nation state. So he might be the guy to finally get this done.
Okay, I know there's also another thing on the I know that the CBI official rate and the CBI the CBI official rate and the Dinar monetary are nearly equal to one another. So is that a sign also that it's going to come also?
Yes.
Is imminent?
Yeah, I think incrementally that's good. That's good.
Yeah, because I know it's nearly equal to one another now. This hasn't been the case for like a long time, but now I'm noticing it's like the Dinar market rate is increasing up. It's almost equal to the Dinar, the CBI official rate.
Well, unfortunately, we hear a lot of things coming out from a lot of sectors of the government, and they have a rumor mill that they make declaratory statements which turn out the next day not to be true. There's self-interest in that. So I can't necessarily speak directly to that, other than to say that if you stand back and look in general what the CBI is doing, they are moving ahead with the deletion of the zeros, which is technically the collection of the provisionary currency. They have announced that the release of the lower denoms to the general public is coming. That can't happen without a reinstitution because it makes no sense. You can't, a $5 bill be worth a penny, So it seems to me that everything is moving in the right direction. But we're going to continue. As a matter of fact, remember last month there was a story that a body had killed himself and his wife and his 3 children? I mean, some of the strangest stuff gets released in Iraq, and, of course, everyone believes it right away. They never seem to learn, and then it gets debunked the next day. So the only way I can answer the question is don't pay too much attention to a lot of the technical stuff. Look at the general what's going on, and everything, again, is moving in the right direction. I think the next 2 weeks are going to be very important.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Bye-bye. Okay, our next caller is area code 405. That's 405. Go ahead.
Good morning, Jim. This is Tom in Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
Well, I've had this on my mind for several weeks now, but every once in a while I would not think of the call until afterwards, which did me no good. What I'm thinking about here is distributing some of the foreign currencies to some of the people, and not all of them, but just for the fact that once it does revalue, they would have it and they could make their own deal on some of it. And then we could have money to get to a place and have a meeting and distribute the rest of what I was planning to give them.
Well, as long as you have gift letters in place, then you can do it any way you want. Whether you give them the currency to exchange or give them the lump sum after you've done the exchange. I'm talking about if you do it outside of the trust. Just make sure that you have gift letters. I actually wouldn't even recommend telling them that you're going to give them the gift. They may think that the dinar is a scam. They may not understand. I myself have about 15 gifts, and I do this for a living, and my own friends and family have absolutely no idea what I'm doing unless they stumble across my call. When this thing pops, then I'll call them all. We'll all get together, and I'll start handing out checks, and they just will be blown away. But that's personally the way I'm going to do it. Just make sure you have a gift letter that's dated and notarized so that no one can challenge the irrevocable gift prior to the revaluation.
Okay, I do have the trust, and the money, or the currencies, I should say, is in the trust.
All right. Well, what will happen is, you'll if you don't have it, send me an email. I'll send you the exchange protocol if you have a trust, and it even explains that when you go to the bank to do your exchange, you do not take the gift trust. You do not even discuss gifts. You merely exchange all your currency, put all the U.S. dollars in your master trust bank account, and then after that money is available for withdrawal, you go back to the bank with your gift sub-trust and establish individual accounts for each of your gift and then transfer the funds to those accounts.
Okay. I'm not sure. Let me think about this for just a second here. If I was to distribute this, a small amount, just so that they would have money to travel motel foods and all that. You know what I'm saying there, And
well, if you're going to do that, you're within the gifting rules, so you can give them that money, and there's no taxable event to you or them. So, if you just, for example, if you want to invite them to the seminar, just as an example, you can just, give them each $2,500 and say, here, this is travel expenses and whatever, But once the reinstitution of the dinar happens, the calls that we're doing now and that we've been doing for 8 years are going to stop. And we're going to deal specifically with issues like this: how you fund the trust, how you manage the trust, how you distribute gifts, the logistics of the Disney trip. All of that will be dealt with once the reinstitution happens.
Well, I was wondering what would happen if I took the dinar out of the trust to distribute it to each of them, like you say, for about $2,500 or $3,000. And how would that affect me tax-wise?
Wouldn't affect you at all. It's a gift of $2,500. It's been below the threshold for a gift. You're fine. You can do that. But again, we'll explain how all that works once the reinstitution happens. I got 100 questions like that a day, and until the reinstitution happens, it's just not time to discuss that.
Well, maybe you need to go get that button and push it and say, here it is. I would love to see it. We got our first real good snowfall down here, and everything's all whitewashed out there. And now, if we can just get this going, I wouldn't mind the cabin fever.
Like I said, once the reinstitution happens, all of those questions will be directly dealt with. Okay, Tom?
Okay, and I'm glad to hear you're doing better, sir.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. You take care.
You too, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, our next caller, looks like Doug is back. Doug? No, he's not back. Okay. Well, Tom is our last caller for this afternoon. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to our call. We try to provide you the information you need to make a rational decision about what to do prior to the revaluation. Again, I strongly suggest if the things we've discussed are of interest, you contact us and get our initial package. You're under absolutely no obligation by doing so. It has all of the information you need about us, about the revaluation, about trusts in general. You can certainly contact us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you. There will be no consultation fee. Everything you need to proceed is included in that initial package. Our next call is scheduled for next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature should happen between now and then, we'll try to get an emergency email out and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks once again for listening, folks, and have a great week. Bye-bye.